Congratulations, you've made it to the final showcase in our cardiac electrophysiology series. Step into the ring, folks, and see the amazing pacemaker potential in action! Yay! The pacemaker action potential follows three specific phases with a typical electrical tracing. As you can guess, the movement of specific ions through specific ion channels results in voltage changes across the pacemaker cell, leading to slow depolarization, rapid depolarization, and repolarization to resting membrane potential. Alright, let's ease into the pacemaker action potential before we really ramp things up. This ramp here represents phase 4 on the pacemaker action potential tracing, a period marked by slow, spontaneous depolarization, or inward current of positively charged ions, in this case, sodium. You might recall from our last two sketches that a rush of sodium ions into the cell leads to depolarizing current, or upstroke. So if you're thinking something seems a bit funny here, you're not wrong. In the pacemaker action potential, we're talking about a special type of sodium ion inward current that's very different from the depolarizing inward currents of a non-pacemaker cell. This special sodium current is actually called the funny current. We're not clowning around here, but this guy is. Let this clown here slowly walking up the ramp help you associate phase 4 of the pacemaker action potential with funny current. You'll also notice our clown is leaving behind a trail of circus peanuts, Sketchy's recurring symbol for sodium. So, this is a funny current of sodium ions moving into the cell, which allows the cell to slowly depolarize. But the really neat thing about phase 4 depolarization is that it's automatic. Automaticity means cells that carry out the pacemaker action potential can generate their own action potentials, which is why this ramp here is actually an automatically operated treadmill. Each phase 4 depolarization is prompted by repolarization of the preceding pacemaker action potential, ensuring that each action potential is followed by another action potential. The automaticity of phase 4 is pivotal for proper cardiac conduction in the heart. Recall that a group of specialized cells known as the SA node set the pace for cardiac conduction. So we brought back our seasoned conductor here to represent SA nodal pacemaker conduction. The S and A-shaped musical notes are a reminder that in normal physiology, the SA node is responsible for generating the pacemaker potential. Recall that the SA node's rate of firing influences heart rate, and all this hinges on the rate of phase 4 depolarization. To help illustrate this very important concept, let's send in the clowns! I always wanted to say that. Notice we have another clown here on an alternate treadmill that is markedly shorter and steeper than the ramp in the foreground. This shorter, more inclined ramp represents what the tracing may look like when we have an increase in the rate of phase 4 depolarization. A quickened phase 4 depolarization leads to faster SA node conduction, which is why our clown here is holding up this sign for the conductor, cueing him to speed up. The quicker you get through phase 4, the quicker you can fire that action potential, conduct that action potential through the heart, and pump blood out of the heart. On the flip side, prolonging phase 4 reduces the rate of spontaneous depolarization, slowing down the heart. Following slow phase 4 depolarization, we're ready for upstroke, or phase 0. To help trace this out, we have this trampoline artist rising upwards. There are a couple distinguishing features of upstroke in the pacemaker versus non-pacemaker potential. First, compared to non-pacemaker cells, the upstroke of the pacemaker action potential is slower and less steep. Notice these motion lines here. Second, the upstroke in the pacemaker action potential tracing reflects the influx of calcium ions via opening of voltage-gated L-type channels. At Sketchy, we represent calcium ions with calcium-rich ice cream. Hence our trampoline artist amazes the crowd with her ice cream cone balancing act. Can't we all appreciate a good dairy trick? Also note that unlike the non-pacemaker action potential, you will not see a phase 1 or phase 2 in the pacemaker action potential tracing. And we don't see any sustained plateaus here because our artist is not stopping or slowing down. This barely there platform she's landed on should help you remember that the tracing of the pacemaker action potential is marked by an absent phase 1 and phase 2. So with that, let's slide into phase 3. Phase 3 is marked by the halt of inward calcium ion movement and the facilitation of outward potassium ion movement. At Sketchy, we represent potassium with bananas, which we placed right here. Ooh, whoopsie, the old banana slip and slide gag. Classic. The outward movement of potassium ions leads to repolarization of membrane potential, which is traced out here with this ballerina sliding down the slide. Remember, the repolarization phase of one pacemaker action potential will prompt phase 4 depolarization of the next, and the cycle continues. Now that we know the ups and downs of the pacemaker action potential, let's discuss latent and ectopic pacemakers. In normal physiology, the SA node is the pacemaker. However, other clusters of conducting cells, i.e. the AV node or His-Purkinje, have the capacity to carry out the pacemaker potential. Specifically, phase 4 depolarization. These potential pacemakers that exist outside of the SA node are known as latent pacemakers. Recall that the SA node is the normal dominant pacemaker of the heart. When the SA node is running the show, we are said to be in normal sinus rhythm, marked by a heart rate between 60 to 100 beats per minute. Let our conductor's trusty metronome here with its 60 and 100 markers help you remember the physiological parameters of sinus rate. But why is the SA node the dominant pacemaker? Well, this is due to an important property known as overdrive suppression. Remember, other foci of conducting cells, like the AV node for instance, have the potential to pace the heart. That is, they are potential pacemakers. Let this AV guy, exhibiting great potential, represent a potential pacemaker. Unfortunately, our conductor just can't be bothered, so he's displaying a little dominance here by shushing the AV guy. Overdrive suppression is the process by which the fast pacemaker action potential arising from the SA node essentially outpaces a comparably slower pacemaker action potential arising from a latent pacemaker. Due to this important property, the heart is able to maintain normal sinus rate. However, if the SA node fails to initiate the action potential, other parts of the conduction system may take over pacemaker activity. These can include the AV node, bundle of His, or Purkinje fibers, which is why we've cleverly given this AV guy a bundle of electrical cables. But the intrinsic firing rate of these other potential pacemakers is much slower than that of the SA node, somewhere around 40 beats per minute, hence the number 40 on this speaker. Careful there, buddy. 40 amps is not the ideal setting for a hefty piece of electrical equipment. Much like a significantly slower heart rate is not ideal for carrying out normal cardiovascular functions. Remember, the heart likes to be in sinus. When the SA node is not running the show, look out for some pretty shocking abnormalities on an electrocardiogram. More on that in another lesson. When the pacemaking activity of potential pacemakers is suppressed by the SA node, it is referred to as a latent pacemaker. But when a potential pacemaker is no longer suppressed by the SA node, it is referred to as an ectopic pacemaker, or ectopic focus. Just so you know, ectopic foci can also develop in the muscle cells of the heart in the atria or ventricles, but here we'll focus on foci arising in the normal conduction pathway. Ectopic pacemaking occurs under one of the following conditions. 1. The SA node slows down or stops due to vagal stimulation, disease, or from a pharmacological substance. This medicine bottle in our seasoned conductor's pocket is a reminder that commonly used medications, such as calcium channel blockers, slow the normal sinus rate. Remember, we need calcium to excite the cell in a pacemaker potential. So, if you block those channels, you will not achieve a normal pacemaker potential, leaving the door open for an ectopic pacemaker. In another scenario, the SA node isn't directly affected by autonomic pathologic or pharmacological effects, but rather a potential pacemaker, say the AV node, starts to fire at a faster rate than the SA node. This can happen in young athletes who naturally have a more pronounced parasympathetic tone and thus a slower sinus rate, giving the AV node the opportunity to take over the pacing of the heart. Remember, the fastest pacemaker emerges as the dominant pacemaker. Hence, when this AV guy knocks over the conductor's metronome, our conductor can no longer remain the dominant alpha. The AV guy is now the focus of everyone's attention. Kind of like if the intrinsic firing rate of the AV node overtakes SA nodal firing, the AV node becomes the focus of pacemaking. In the final scenario, the SA node can generate a normal pacemaker potential, but that action potential doesn't go anywhere due to a block in the normal conduction pathway. The most common reason for this is nodal fibrosis due to older age. If there is an SA nodal exit block, essentially it's lights out for the SA node. I mean, how can our maestro conduct his orchestra in the dark? Anyway, since the action potential does not exit the SA node, some other potential pacemaker, like the AV node for instance, takes over. Luckily for us, the AV guy came prepared. After all, the show must go on. And that's a wrap for pacemaker potentials and cardiac conduction. Remember, cardiac conduction is all about conducting units and contractile units. On the macro level, the conduction in the heart follows a specific sequence of timed events. On the micro level, this rests on two distinct action potentials, those arising in the SA node and those arising in the ventricular cell. Looping back once more, the pacemaker potential is distinguished by its spontaneous phase 4 depolarization, that is, automaticity, unstable resting membrane potential, and no sustained plateau. Well, that's all for now, but don't worry, this show likes to repeat itself, and we've got plenty of supercharged sketches ahead. Okay, I'm sorry, that's the last tacky pun I'm gonna do. Except for that pun, that one.